Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Now, not that much news in EVE Online at the moment. We did get a mass test lot last week where we got a first look at the new bubbles on CC, and I think that those will be a major improvement, so that is looking good. But other than that, it's pretty quiet on the update front, so let's just jump straight into the market since that's what we're here for. And as always, we are going to start off with a plex that's gonna be at 35 seconds. Like that. And plex have gone up just a little bit. 3,240,000 ISK in JITA itself. Buyers in JITA at 3,110,000 ISK. So pretty narrow margin once again. If we take out the filter to take a look at what's happening in the trade stations, we can see that the margin actually drops down to almost nothing. 3,180,000 ISK in perimeter. Buyers go up to 3,135,000 ISK. So a very narrow margin. We can see on the chart here that plex is moving sideways, pretty much a slight uptick at the tail end, but the 5-day and 20-day moving average are pretty much flat. And so at the moment, it is still a little bit of guessing which way plex are going to go. There are some sales from time to time, of course. These are the holidays, let's keep that in mind as well. That might either keep inflation in check, or that might end up being the turning point for plex as well, because it's still pretty damn expensive, of course. If we take a look at that, I think we can just grab the calculator. It's been a while since I've done that, but if we take 3,180 and then we do that times 500. Yeah, almost 1.6 billion ISK for 30 days game time. So that is something to remember as well. We are definitely still in very expensive plex territory, but at the moment it's pretty much sideways right here, which is a little bit surprising to me, because with the alpha changes you would think that perhaps at least some speculation would go in on higher prices, with more demand coming for the new skill injector, that the 24-hour skill injector that's specific for alpha clones. Next up, as always, we'll take a look at the multiple pirate trading certificate. Here the volatility continues, massive volumes again just a couple of days ago. That is clear indication that a specific sale came out for the trading certificates, driving the price back down from 1.5 billion, which is a little bit less than plex, to 1.3 billion, and the cheapest one in JITA station. That is very unusual, but 1.3 billion for a multiple pirate trading certificate, 1.2 billion for the buyers. That's very cheap compared to plex, of course. So if you want to train a second character on your account at the moment, you could definitely pick a couple of those up. Next up, we've got the skill extractors, of course, pretty much flat. That was to be expected, with again some median daily prices that go up a little bit, but the 20-day moving average is extremely flat at the moment, just above 350 million ISK. Current price 355 million ISK for the sellers, 349 million ISK for the buyers. Again, very narrow margin here, mirroring plex, of course, because those are directly related to one another. You create skill extractors from plex in the next store, and as a result, this is of course pretty flat. Which way is it going to go? Honestly, it's very difficult for me to gauge that, to speculate on that. I honestly have absolutely no idea. If I would have to give odds, it would be just, but by a very little margin, in favor to increase prices, because winter tends to be a bit more activity, but generally, of course, inflation is the name of the game at the moment, since things are so stable in Nosek. Next up, we've got we've got the large skill injectors, which we usually check first. A little bit of an upswing on that one, but flat at the tail end and still staying below 800 million ISK. So 795 million ISK for the sellers, 782 million ISK for the buyers. Again, decently narrow margin right here. I am actually curious to JITA, because this is very close to 800 million, and exactly 807 million ISK almost for the sellers of large skill injectors in JITA itself. So you can clearly see that for this plex related market, The player-owned trade hubs are very important. They do make a decent difference just across the board for all injectors, plex, trade certificates, all of that stuff is definitely a decent chunk cheaper in those trade hubs. And in Jita, a large scale injector actually costs more than 800 million ISK, which is decently expensive. And my personal expectation, at some point, just due to inflation, this could still take a long time as well. This will end up becoming like the priced item that goes for like around 1 billion ISK, and that people tend to hold on to as a protection against inflation. That is my personal expectation. Now, what might change that, of course, are these daily alpha injectors, because they might actually put a serious cap on the potential for skill points themselves. But it makes more sense, in my opinion, to look for that investment of around 1 billion ISK that is close to what it would cost to have a month playtime. And if you can do that in one item that is going to inflate with plex and that potentially has this speculation on top of that for skill point value, then large skill injectors would be that. And then we've got the small skill injectors lost after a bit of a fallback as well. We see this recovery here too. So this is starting to mirror large skill injectors in the chart here, in the activity, and we just need a little bit longer for this to become a one-on-one. Once small skill injectors have existed for 1 year, currently they are selling for 160 million ISK, bars at 153, again decently a narrow margin for these items as well. Let's move on to some minerals at 640. There we go. As always, we'll start with titanium, and if we take out the filter, because as you can see here, we get some weird sell orders of very small numbers, 11 and 5 jumps away, not very representative. 4.8 ISK for these sellers, up a little bit from last week, still shy of 5 ISK, which I would say at 5 ISK, at least mining for some titanium in high sec makes some sense. So we're getting closer to that, and the buyers are at 469. When it comes to the volumes though, 1 billion still being sold here, 540 million, another 650 million. It's quite big numbers. On the buyer side, you have to go down a little bit to 458 until you find orders that ask for like 1 billion ISK of titanium. In general, it's decently balanced, but slight edge, so a little bit of threat from oversupply. And we can see here that titanium tried to go up to 5 ISK, but that's when some bigger dumping happened once again, and so we're being pushed back down. But the trend here in the last couple of weeks seems to be that we want to head towards 5 ISK, so let's hope that this can continue. If we could substantially break that at some point, so if there's enough demand to pick all of this up, we can see that we're still talking probably 3-4 billion units, no, yeah, at least 4 billion units, probably close to 4 to 5 billion units before we reach that 5 ISK mark on the seller side. But once we go through that, there is good hope that titanium might get back up there, because it's shown that it's capable of doing that before. It can get to 6 ISK, which is a pretty good price considering the state of mining in the game at the moment. Next up here we've got pyrite, also a little bump up, so that is another indication that perhaps there is starting to be a bit of a bottom in the minerals from last week or so. So slight tick up, we went below 5 ISK for pyrite, now sellers are back up above to that to 5.17, and the buyers are slowly forced up to 499. So especially once those get above 5 ISK, you have a good chance for a sustained increase in price. But pyrite is a very difficult mineral at the moment. I think that it must basically be oversupplied from nullsec with some of the changes, because we are coming down from a 1-year low point. That is something to remember, of course. Next up here we've got Mexilon also breaking its ascent, so yet another sign that bottom forming is happening in the mineral market. It is below 65 ISK, which is still okay, but it's not great. 70 ISK was a really good price. You knew exactly that, alright, focusing on Mexilon is going to be the very best thing to do, especially in high sec. Here, it's still 64 ISK for Mexilon, which even historically speaking, from before all of the mining changes, is not such a bad price, but you can clearly see on the chart that we have of course had to give back quite a little bit of ground, quite a bit of efficiency. We are, if you disregard the very first dive down after the Ascension expansion, where the Rorcal changes for instance took place, we are back at a low point since then. So that is not good news. The fact that we are stalling here, I would say, on the descent is good news in my opinion. 64 ISK for the sellers, 62.31 for the buyers. Again, pretty narrow margin. Let's hope that we can start pushing back up. Next up here we get Isogen, one that doesn't indicate a stopping of the descent here, just going straight down to 40 ISK, which is really crazy. Historically speaking, Isogen was always worth more than Mexlon. This time it is staying 50% cheaper than Mexlon. 42 ISK for the sellers, 42 ISK for the buyers. At least that margin is closing. So at some point this is going to stop, but obviously 1 year low point, 40 ISK for Isogen. Pretty crazy situation, but yeah, the chart in and of itself does look like something that it feels risky, but it is something that you might want to consider pouring at least some ISK into, because there is no way that this can continue to go on like that forever. At some point, whether it's the miners themselves or the sellers or the transporters, wherever all of this Isogen is going to come from, it's not going to make sense anymore to keep pouring more Isogen in this market. That's when we have a chance for a rally, albeit a pretty small one. Because once the price goes back up, if they're willing to keep dumping even at 45 ISK, of course, then once it goes back to 45, they're willing to dump that once again. So it's a difficult situation, and Isogen is definitely like the worst performing mineral that we have at the moment, unless Noxium can knock a little bit more wind out of our sails. No, actually not bad. So it went down to 317, but here again we can see a stalling of that downward trend, trying to get back to 325. 318 ISK for the sellers, 307 for the buyers. Still a bit of a margin here, so we have to be careful. Also, if you look at the volumes here, 8 million, 2 million, so definitely tens of millions still coming in here at 318, which is quite a lot more than the demand at 307. Well, we get 10 million here, but it's also, well, yeah, actually, okay, yeah, starting to balance out here and stalling in the price as well. So let's hope that this is the start of good news. I would personally love to see slightly higher prices for minerals. Then it comes to Nullsec, so let's start with Zydrine, also stopping its descent but still slowly going down. So we're still talking pretty cheap Zydrine, 961 for the sellers, 930 for the buyers. So Zydrine around 950 is definitely on the cheap side. And then when it comes to a Megasite, the same picture here, still on the descending track, but also obviously slowing down here at the end. Megasite selling for 1085 ISK and the buyers are at 1050. Here we can clearly see that the margin is closing between sellers and buyers. Although it's only one buy order here, the next one is coming down at 1040. All of this again does indicate that at some point people are either going to stop dumping more minerals because it just isn't effective anymore, or it doesn't make them any money anymore. But we are doing so at pretty low prices. And finally, we also have Morphite that does a little bit of a jump up as well once it broke 9,000 ISK. So we've seen that before, 9,100 for the sellers, 8,530 for the buyers. Still in my opinion, a pretty good buy opportunity, but it's pretty obvious here that once the chart went below 9,000 ISK, some investors came in, bought the volume and pushed the price back to an average of 9,100 ISK. So the investors on Morphite are definitely eyeing that market quite intensely. Next up, we've got our PI segment at 14 minutes. There we go. So let's take a look at these. The broadcast nodes trying to rally back to 2.5 million, but already on their way back down towards 2 million, a little bit above that. So we are close to normal prices once again for the broadcast nodes. 2.2 million for the sellers, 2.1 million for the buyers. We're probably talking a margin of 100,000 ISK against normal prices before the refineries came out. So lots of speculation. We can see that is basically, you could call it a bubble, but this period of higher prices lasted almost 3 months, so 2.5 months of speculative bubble, or a speculative burst up here to above 2.5 million, and we kept hovering to around 2.75 million at a very high point, and now we're going back down to 2 million. So this is of course a typical pattern when CCP comes out with a new set of structures. There is lots of demand all of a sudden for all of this PI, and as a result you get a nice sell opportunity. My mistake on this one, because this was predictable, was the timing. I thought the winter expansion would maybe come late this month around this period, or even early next month. It did come a little bit earlier, and thus the increased price here, which I expected to happen in September, actually happened in August. So that's basically the pattern that we're seeing here. A lesson to learn when CCP comes out with new structures. I would say there are structures that we know are in the pipeline, stuff like a sort of an intelligence structure for nullsec, where perhaps it could have an influence on local, or the type of information that is given to the locals, and also of course a sort of a propaganda tower, which I think the first one, it's gonna be only for nullsec. I'm not sure if there's gonna be any need to spam those across the system. I think that the impact there might be very small, but something like a propaganda tower I think could be very interesting, because that would, in my opinion, be like the first structure that would be not about efficiency, not about making ISK or anything like that, but that would just be about, you know, creating your own little space, showing that you are considering that part of space your own. And if you could deploy that throughout the entirety of New Eden, I think that there could be very, very strong demand for that. So that is one that I'm keeping an eye out for. Once CCP comes out with information about that, I might jump back in to try and start the investments. Of course, at this point, when we're going to really low points here, like let's say close to the 2 million mark on the chart, you should probably look into stocking on those already. And then of course the big one is going to be the new Stargates. When CCP does come out with that one, I think those will be extremely costly. Blowing those up will also be something that I think will be of great interest to nullsec, and as a result I think that those could actually become something where lots of profits can be made from PI like this one, if we see this pattern show up again. It's speculation, but I think that we've seen the pattern several times before now, and so we should try to get ready for that. Next up here we got construction blocks. These are of course refined PI materials. Those have recovered a little bit better, and these are basically at around 12,000 ISK, I would say on average. 12,700 for the sellers, 11,500 for the buyers. I would say we're right at the normal price for construction blocks. Consumer electronics next. This one is a little bit weird here, because we have been sustaining a price of around 15,000 ISK for a very long time. Here at the tail end we have recovered back down to 11,000 ISK, and now just below 12,500. I would say we're actually at the normal price. Maybe a little bit below that, with the first sell order coming in at 12,000 and 11,300 for the buyer. Still a wide margin. You could maybe, because it's 11,300, which is right here on the chart, you could perhaps still try to pick up some cheap consumer electronics, especially, you know, 11,300 compared to the entire chart is below average, and a good time to try and pick some up. But keep in mind, 12,500 does tend to be an average for these refined PI materials, if they're not too difficult to make. Coolants next, continuing its descent, quite surprising to me, now well below 10,000 ISK. 9,500 for the sellers and 9,000 for the buyers. The reason that we are seeing this, I would say, is that CCP probably underestimated the difference in fuel usage when it comes to refineries and the number of moon mining bosses that were around. And as a result, we have already seen that CCP intervened in like the isotopes and the ice products, because, well, demand just dropped off so much that they needed to do something to prop up those items a little bit. And so the PI related to fuels is doing the same thing. Now, let's keep in mind, CCP might intervene in that as well. And if we look at this entire chart, we're obviously at a 1-year low point for coolants. You're able to buy these for close to 9,000 ISK. Again, it's a PI gamble. It's a gamble on perhaps future things to happen when it comes to structures, but I think that this chart does look very interesting. The reason, as I've said at the moment, is of course potentially a structural one where the alliances need a lot less in fuel in order to do their moon mining activities compared to the POS system that they used before. Next up we have enriched uranium, same thing of course, also related to fuels, so at a 1-year low, currently selling for 12,700, buyers are at 11,600, it's below average. I would say it's not too crazy below average actually, but there we go, on the chart it's obviously at a 1-year low point again. Now integrity response drones, these are of course advanced PI materials that are related to the structures, and here we can see after this one actually spiked up in September and stayed there up until almost November. So not a bad one. I think I basically didn't have that one in the roster for Eve Talk, because otherwise I think we would have bought here at 2.5 million. Integrity response drones, interesting one to keep an eye for the next structures. But now this compared to broadcast nodes, we can see that these are basically going straight back down, right? After the speculation, after the spike in demand, basically a straight rally down, and now a slow descent back towards 2.5 million, which is a normal price for it. 2.7 million for the sellers, 2.6 million for the buyers. So again, 100,000 ISK to go, but we are getting pretty close to those normal prices. Mechanical parts, fuel related, went below 10,000 ISK, tries to come back a little bit, but obviously definitely below average. 10,400 for the sellers, 10,080 for the buyers. So here again, it's the fuel story. Nuclear reactors next. That one has been very interesting. And here again at the tail end with this type of volatility, I would say that this one is very interesting as well. Went below 100,000 ISK, is currently staying there, and we do have some purchasing happening at the moment, and I would understand that. If you look at nuclear reactors over the course of the year, started above 100,000, went well below that, and then went above that 1, 2, 3 times, back below that, and then a massive spike with the structures up to 180,000 ISK, which is like 80% increase in price, not bad at all. And now in less than a month, back down to less than 100,000. So this is a pretty volatile one that you could actively look into to try and eke out some profits. 114,000 for the sellers, but 88,600 for the buyers. So if you could try to eke out some buys here at close to 90,000 ISK, if you look at this entire chart, then that is probably not a bad purchase at the moment. Next up here we've got robotics, also related to fuels of course, try to go down to less than 90,000 is at 85,000 is really crazy low, 1-year low once again. Bit of a recovery on that on higher volumes, people spot this of course and are starting to stock up on all of that PI related to fuels, perhaps for a later time. 91,000 for the sellers, 85,000 for the buyers, obviously well below average. 100,000 you could say is the normal average for robotics. Self-harmonizing power cores related to structure, so once again also going down after the big spike late October, and well, we're looking at 2 million at the low end here for the normal prices, so 2.3 million almost for the sellers and almost 2.3 million as well for the buyers. So the margin has narrowed, decent demand here in volumes, but decent supply coming in as well. So here I think that basically the longer we go on, the closer we'll get to normal prices, and even the 2 million might come into play at some point, which I think would be interesting to start to stock up on some of these power cores. Superconductors next, staying below 12,500, again a dip to a 1-year low with a volume spike for some investments, giving us a little bit below average prices at 12,000 is for the sellers and 11,400 for the buyers. Test cultures also related to structures. I think basically you'll need this to create stuff like the power cores, and as a result here, to my surprise, we had a very stable 6 months down here at around 8,000 ISK, and here we can see I think the Ascension spike and here the refinery spike as well. So this one, be careful. I needed a lot of patience because I purchased throughout this entire period here, but I managed to make some profit out of test cultures on the trade as well. Currently 9,400 for the sellers, 8,200 for the buyers. For my investments, so for my purchases, I think I'd done like 4 or 5 purchases, but I do remember that they were all below 8,000 ISK. So that is the potential for test culture, so you can pick that up sometimes for less than 8,000 ISK. And now we've got wetware mainframes, again advanced PI, directly related to structure, so we get the double spike here, speculation first, then actual demand late October, and now we are currently retreating back below 2.5 million. It's already looking pretty good actually. 2.5 for the sellers, 2.4 for the buyers. I would say this is actually a normal price for wetware mainframes. So at the moment I would say keep an eye on what's happening with the fuel related PI materials. I think that there are some purchase potentials right there, and of course for the advanced PI materials I would say look for the charts to actually break close to those 1-year low points, and then perhaps look to purchase some of it. After PI we've got our Tech 1 chips, that's gonna be at 25.25. There we go. Let's go over these. We could see some rallies a little bit, but I would say that in general we're going to look for a pretty stable Tech 1 market, considering that you could say the minerals are stabilizing as well. Here Apocalypse, pretty big increase in volumes and an increase in price, so that's obviously a Nosec purchase, and as a result there's just no supply here anymore, and it's up to 178 million ISK. But you can see the lack of actual market forces here, because the buyers, they just don't budge. 142, that's what we're gonna pay for this. So as a result, what we're gonna look for here is a slow increase of supply of Apocalypses as people try to sell them for 177, then 160, then 150, and then we'll just get right back down here. So it'll be a little bit of a spike, but that will come back down pretty quickly. The Caracal actually dropping to 9 million ISK, so that must be oversupplied pretty crazily. 9 million for the sellers, 8.2 million for the buyers. At some point an alliance is going to come in here and just purchase everything below 10 million ISK in my opinion. But right now, 1-year low point for the Caracal, very popular Nosec ship. I'm quite surprised by that, but that's basically the name of the game when you're being oversupplied a little bit. First sellers coming in at 9 million is pretty damn crazy. Catalysts next, pretty stable but also trending down, heading towards less than a million ISK. Once again 1 million for the sellers and less than 900,000 for the buyers. The more supply keeps coming in, the more this is going to be pushed down, of course. Drake next, also under pressure. Perhaps it's like a delayed reaction from the lower mineral prices, but this is like the third one in a row that is close to a 1-year low point. 43 million for the sellers, 38 million for the buyers. Very cheap Drakes. It is possible, right? We do see that the minerals have all just basically bottomed out, lots of them from 1-year low points, and as a result perhaps a delayed reaction, because you of course need to first purchase all of those cheap minerals and then turn that into ships. It takes a little bit of time. And so now here the Drake again, 1-year low point. Catalyst definitely trending down. Caracal 1-year low point, not looking too good. Here is the Ferox again playing with the low end of things. A little bit of a purchase happening here to sustain the price, but it's still selling for 46 million ISK, well below 50, and 41 for the buyers. Hurricane here, next one, also definitely trending down at the moment, slowly seesawing its way down below 45 million. Is currently selling for first one coming in at 40.5, but 43.8 million for the sellers, 40 million for the buyers, and a clear indication here that well, Hurricane, besides actually being flown by some Nosec alliances, the market in Jita itself is almost non-existent. Megatron next, again the trend down is unstoppable, heading for 150, 151 for the sellers, 143 for the buyers. Very cheap battleships. This is, I think, the mineral. If we take a look for instance at Tritanium, you can see that one going down from October to now, and then here for the Megatron, very same thing. So it's a little bit delayed. Sometimes there were some discrepancies, but eventually the low mineral prices do find their way in the Tech 1 market, of course. The Merlin also starting to drop back down, managed to somehow command a premium of around 100,000 ISK for the last few months, but now it's unfortunately on its way back down. The Oracle actually jumping back up a little bit, but jumping back up from, of course, that very low point of close to 65 million. Is currently selling for 71 million, 66 million for the buyers. The Raven next, also obviously hovering around the low end, although recovering just a touch at the tail end here. 5-day moving average crossing, 20-day moving average, slightly increased volumes as well. Currently selling for 158 million ISK. Then we've got the Retrievers, obviously again below 22.5 million and apparently willing to stay there. So I mean, this is the trend here again. The Tempest down to 150. That is just from October to here late November. It's the mineral prices going down. Now we've got the Thrasher also playing with 1 million, sellers just above, buyers at 900,000. Same pattern for all of those destroyers. Tornado, again, increased volumes, a little bit of dumping there. This one looked quite interesting, but now look at that, 60 million ISK. Are we really selling them for less than that? Yes, we are. Very, very cheap tornadoes at the moment. I am curious to see what's going to happen here, because that's a substantial amount coming in at less than 60 million ISK. And tornadoes, again, not a bad ship to be used, whether it's for gank in highsec or even in nullsec. I think that it is being used quite actively. Tristan next up just a touch, but here not much to say. It's a frigate, of course, so it's a little bit less impacted by the mineral prices, costing a little bit less than 500,000. The Venture managing to stay a little bit higher again, bit of a premium on that one, from 200,000 to 250,000. That is obviously going to be the Resource Wars. It is something that is accessible, doable in small chunks, and if you want to get started on that, then of course you get the tier 1s where you'll take your Venture. I've not been flying that myself all too much. I've been focusing on some other stuff like some active exploration, but I think I'm trying to find the time to also jump into some higher level Resource War sites. Just haven't been able to do it just yet. Next up here we got the Vexor. Again here I think that this is pretty obviously again October high point, then all the way down here because of the lower mineral prices. Currently selling for less than 10 million at 9.6 million. Really, the Tech 1 market, of course, after a little bit of a delay, the mineral prices are starting to shine through. Next up, the Tech 2 ships at 31.45. There we go. Let's take a look at these. Unfortunately, I think basically I haven't really spotted anything in the region of either numbers that would indicate that everything is up and running, or that we somehow have more moon minerals coming to the market. I also haven't seen any real indications of like big wars or big losses in the refineries that could indicate higher price or anything like that. At the moment, it's just, you know, everything I think is being settled, being deployed. People are getting into their routines, and it's not likely to change at the moment, and as a result we're paying that big premium on Tech 2 prices. Ares very flat above 35 million ISK. Cerberus next here, definitely at a high point as well, 280 million at the moment for the Cerberus. Very good exploration ship as well, by the way. Claw next, here we can see here very flat, just below 40 million ISK. There is not much to say at the moment. We're paying that change in moon mining prices premium on all of these Tech 2 ships. And what I would need to see before I actually start to jump in on this as speculation is either a move up on like a war, right? Like if like a big group would start to like burn down someone's moon mining activities across the board, and then we actually start to see a spike up in Tech 2 price because of that, then we could start to see this as a new normal, as a new bottom price, or of course a slow descent or a descent, maybe of some more magnitude, towards that normal price range that we had before the moon mining changes, the speculation that happened here in August and things like that. So here we've got the Crow again. There is some speculation happening on that one, but it's basically staying at around the 35 million price mark. The Crusader next, same thing, right? Although slightly going down towards 30 million, but you could see that we would need a price range of 20 to 25 million before we're back at the normal prices. So it's still, the premium is basically ruling all of it. Here is the Heretic, and of course the bigger you go in destroyers and cruisers, the fewer ships are available on the market. The smaller the market, the bigger the variations still remain, of course. So I would say the frigates are your barometer Those are easiest to produce, biggest in volumes, and easiest, I think, to create a trend in. And so as a result, at the moment, yep, the Hound is basically flat at 35 million. Tech 2 frigates, 35 million, you're paying that premium. Depending on where we move from here, we could start to look back at the Tech 2 market, I think. But the Ishtar, 1 year high point, of course, extremely popular ship, coming back down just a little bit. But yeah, the name of the game is pretty obvious. You're paying the premium for Tech 2 ships at the moment. Perhaps this is also what CCP wants, right? Tech 2 became so popular, definitely ships of the line. And perhaps, you know, CCP might not be all too displeased with these higher Tech 2 ship prices, which I would be perfectly okay with that, right? Because now you at least have an active activity for the base materials of this, which is disruptible, and as a result we could see some interesting speculation on that, and I look forward to that. But I personally am still not sure that that's the case. I'm not sure that once everything is settled and more moon mining activities are going up and running in nullsec, that we won't see a fall back into the price. And so I can't say that the current price of around 35 to even 40 million for some of the more expensive frigates is actually the new normal price from which you should start to look for your investments. The Nemesis next, you know, 35 to 40 million, quite expensive. The stealth bombers are definitely in vogue at the moment. 39 million for the sellers. Yeah, used to be that we were looking to buy some of these for less than 20 million. The Pontifex next, also again that premium, almost 90 million. X Purifier actually just saw a spike up to 45 million, so this could be an indication, this could be a first indication that, yeah, 30 million, 35 million normal price, 30 million your low point, and then from here, then if something happens, you could see these spikes up to 45 million even for some of these frigates. This is the first one where this pattern is shown, so I would need to see it a little bit more often to see like a drop to 30 million and then actually a spike up that makes it trade worthy, but the Purifier here is obviously showing that pattern for the first time. Next up here we've got the Raptor, also went up to almost 50 million, now currently back down, being sold for 35 million. Buyers are at 33, so again look for that 30 million on the buyers, and then we could still go either way, sustain downtrend on more moon supplies, or nope, those are actually new bottom prices where you could make some good deals and then look for sell opportunities. So yeah, maybe a couple more weeks, potentially even the rest of the year, until we start actually seeing that pattern. Here is the Saber falling down to 70 million ISK, and this again, if we would disregard everything before that, if we would say no, we're not gonna wait until we reach 50 million again, then this one looks pretty interesting. Less than 70 million for the sellers, buyers are at 65 million ISK, and here you can see that potentially 80 million comes into play from time to time. So this one actually looks a little bit more on the opposite side, because you do have this sustained downtrend here from above 70 million ISK to now sellers below 70 million ISK with a decent amount as well, and then buyers at 65. And so here, if supplies keep managing to increase, we might actually see a slow push back down to a more normal trade range, from the perspective, of course, of before the refineries. Stiletto next, that one is of course at the 35 million mark, and again a little spike up to 40 million. Interesting stuff, just not I don't feel sure enough to actually invest in these at this point. Stork, 90 million, sustaining that. And then finally we also have the Taranis, slight downtrend, currently being sold for 32 million ISK here. 28 million for the buyers, also below 30 million. And so this here becomes like your gamble. Do you think that at some point buying these at 28 million and then watching the Taranis blow back up towards 40 million could be in the cards or not? That is, I think, the gamble that you need to take if you want to trade in Tech 2 ships at the moment. I would say I still need more information before I do that myself. Next up, Tech 3 ships. Let's take a look at those at 28.30. 38.30, sorry. There we go. As always, we'll start with the destroyers. Here is the Confessor. So after dropping down to like 40 million ISK, is back up a little bit above 50 million ISK. So current trade range obviously 40 to 60 million, which is a decently wide trade range in my opinion. 53 million for the sellers, 48 for the buyers. That is of course right in the middle of that. So perhaps we're starting to settle down, but we do see some serious variety as well. Hecate next, same thing, is definitely settling down below 50 million here. So we're gonna see 48 for the sellers, 44 for the buyers. Yeah, that's actually a decent margin on 44 million. Could still go either way. Is it oversupplied? Yeah, a little bit here. 163, 47, 47. Those are pretty decent numbers for a price that is under pressure at the moment. Next up, we've got the Jackdaw. So my video hasn't had a visible effect on the market. It's still going for less than 50 million, pretty sustainably so. 48 for the sellers, 46 for the buyers, 194 here is a decent amount, but it's also a little bit older, so it looks like actually most of them are stabilizing, and the Confessor might be trying to do so. And then here we've got the Zweipel, also a little bit of variety, but 40 to 50 million, that's a more reasonable trade range, and currently selling for 50 million. Buyers though at 39 million, below 40. So this one is basically, I would say, a smaller market, and thus there's a bit more variety in the price ranges. For the cruisers, let's start with the Legion here, settling at less than 150, selling for 155, buyers at 134 million. No real signs of massive oversupply here, so hopefully these can stabilize as well. Loki next 230. Ooh, that's a volume spike here about a week ago, and actually after reaching 180 million is driven back up at the moment to 230 million and 211 million for the buyers. Loki is still extremely expensive, and here we do see this pattern that if the Loki drops to well below 200 billion, there are some big buyers willing to come in on this market here. Interesting. And then here we've got the Proteus settling at 150 as well. That's quite an unusual data point here, so I would say we're probably looking at something that is actually wrong. 140 million for the Proteus at the moment, 140 for the sellers, 130 for the buyers. Exactly, slightly up from its low point, but definitely still the least performing Tech 3 cruiser. And finally we have the Tengu that is also slowly settling back down to 150, a bit like the Legion. So Legion, Tengu 150, Loki the big winner 200 million, and then the Proteus 140, trying to catch up to the others, but not doing so too greatly. The one thing to note here though is those 500 to 600 Tengus coming in here as the last three sellers at 155. That should put a bit of a stop on the price from going back up, so we're probably looking at a settling down towards 150 on the Tengu here on pretty big supply. But across the board, not too much oversupply in general. We're basically settling down on most of these. The Loki, the big winner of the Tech 3 cruiser changes, that one is still showing some volatility and big purchases, lots of demand on cheaper Lokis. Is quite interesting. And then finally, for the extra product, I got a request for to take another look at salvage, so we are going to do that at this point. 4210. There we go, and I think that that was just in manufacturing materials and then salvage materials. So this is quite a big list, so we're just going to quickly go over this one and look for trends. We do know, of course, that with the refineries we had this big spike because you need rigs in order to do some efficient moon mining, and as a result we again have this spike, which was a lot more interesting from the perspective of what should I have speculated on once I learned that CCP was going to come out with the refineries for this expansion. And here it looks like, yeah, some salvage might have been the right gamble. Alloyed titaniums though went up to like 30,000 ISK and is now settling back down to 20,000 ISK. Normal price a bit above 15,000 ISK. So the settling down here has obviously happened. Armor plates though taking off. That's interesting because I have some armor plates lying around, to 60,000 ISK. Quite a surprise. 55,000 for the sellers, 48 for the buyers. So doubling in price here since early October. No idea why this is happening, but that's quite substantial and definitely noteworthy. Maybe not even related to the refineries themselves. Interesting here. Artificial neural networks, yeah, that's pretty stable, not much to say there. Broken transceivers, we're paying a pretty high price for those at the moment. Burnt logic circuits, anything of note? Basically pretty low at the moment. Capacitor, I'm just going to quickly look for actual changes here at the moment. So chart microcircuits, yep, you get this spike up here in September, then again here in October, and now settling back down to a normal price. So some volatility here around the refineries, nothing too major though. Conductive polymers, nothing too major. Conductive thermoplastics, look at that spike up on big volume, so big purchasing here. What the hell is happening in some of these? If you get an idea, definitely post that in the comments. But we start at 50,000 ISK and currently selling for 86,000 ISK here. And I don't see a reason for that or any CCP intervention. So this one is very weird in my book. Contaminated Lawrence fluoride, that's been this trend up to a 1-year high point at 300,000 ISK even. Yeah, almost that. Quite interesting. 1-year high point for the Lawrence fluids. Nanite compound went to a 1-year high point, is now going back down a little bit. So this is a very mixed picture. It is of course also a very wide category. So current pump, well, after a September spike is now back to a normal price. Not much to say here. Yeah, another one at a high point here. The effective current pumps, 1-year high point. Drone transceiver also coming back down from this high point. Interesting, yeah. And here we've got actually something that's the exact opposite. Enhanced word consoles, 1-year low point, 2.75 million. Currently buyers at 2.8, sellers at almost 3 million. Is actually pretty cheap for these enhanced word consoles. Potentially, I would say that this could be like a nullsec drop or something like that. That is very specific and that is being overly mined at the moment. That would be my speculative explanation on this low point for the word consoles. Interface circuits basically recovering from the refineries here. Impetus console at a high point, 1.25 million. Yep. Intact armor plates, average. Shield emitters, not much to say here. Nope. Yep. Lawrence fluids, again, definitely at a 1-year high point. Going for, yeah, 730,000. I'm actually almost tempted now to go for all-in-one ships and also grab some relic sites and things like that. I wonder if stuff like Lawrence fluids can actually drop from high-sec sites and at like almost $1 million for one. That's interesting. Shield emitters next at a high point, sustaining that so far. Melted capacitor consoles also doing pretty well. Microcircuits not so much, so the Tech 2 salvage is not doing too great, but lots of the other ones are. And then power circuits, not much to say here. Power conduits came at a very high point in November, 1.6 million. Currently back down to 1 million. Not a bad price, but definitely recovering. Not much to say here. Single crystal super alloy I-beams are at a 1-year high point, you know. 300,000 up to 700,000 now. That's definitely a pretty big change here. Not bad. Smash trigger circuits recovering from a high point as well. Anything else that is like really speculative? Yep, trigger units, look at that. A November spike up to 2 million, doubling of the price here at the moment, on its way back down. Not much here. And then here finally the ward consoles as well. Man, this used to cost like less than 50,000 ISK, currently selling more than 100,000 ISK. That is a substantial increase in price here. Yeah, there's some of them, a couple of them are really interesting, like this ward console. And then let's see if I can quickly, can I browse like this? Yeah, find, yeah, here, look at that, the conductive thermoplastics, no explanation for that, massive volumes, why? I don't know. And then the armor plates were also looking quite interesting. So thanks for the suggestions. They're here for the salvage materials. Definitely a very interesting one. It is of course a very large segment of the market. We take 1, take 2 sources from all across the universe, different types of content, and so as a result you get a very mixed picture. But some of them at definitely at 1-year high points, a couple of them interestingly being speculated on, and it's an interesting market. It's just such a large one that I don't think I can check it every single week. I'm going to keep that like in a rotation in the extra products. And basically that's going to be it for this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.